Hi everyone, and now we'll talk about Azure Load Balancer. So it could be Azure or it could be anything. So first we'll discuss about what is meant by load balancer, why we need to use this, and what is the basic purpose of this load balancer. Okay, so all this stuff related to the load balancer we will discuss. So let me take a scenario. For example, there is one company or there is one organization. For example, you can take IRCTC. Okay, so or you can, I think, yeah, IRCTC. Okay, you can take IRCTC. So for example, I want to host an application for IRCTC. What I need to do, I need to go to the market and I need to purchase one virtual machine. This virtual machine I'll purchase, and this virtual machine have certain configurations. Basically, like for example, it has 2 virtual CPUs and 4 GB RAM. For example, this is the configuration for this particular virtual machine. So now this virtual machine having one IP address called 2.2.2.2, for example, you can consider, and you hosted one application inside this IRCTC application. You hosted it, and this application you are accessing by using a domain called www.irctc.com. So this is internet where you used to initiate a request, that is www.irctc.com, and you have a DNS in between. You have a DNS in between, DNS server. Okay, so now what is the purpose of DNS server? Here you used to map your website with an IP address. So if you observe the flow, when you make any request from internet to www.irctc.com, initially it will goes to the DNS server, and there it will resolve the backend IP address, and from there it will reach to the backend IP address. So this is the basic flow. So this is clear. Now, for example, everything is working as expected. The users are able to browse www.irctc.com, and they can able to reach the server, and the server able to save the content back, and user able to see the response. This is absolutely fine, no issue. Now, for example, this particular server having dedicated configuration, that is 2 virtual CPU and 4 GB RAM. For example, this configuration having a capacity of serving request of 10,000 requests per minute. For example, this particular server with this particular configuration having a capacity of serving a maximum of 10,000 requests per minute. So it's absolutely fine. Now, if in case your IRCTC, the request received is increased from 10,000 to 20,000 every day, 10,000 to, so 20,000 requests you are getting, 20,000 requests per minute you are getting. Now what you need to do, you have two options. Option number 1 is you can double the configuration of the server. So that 2 virtual CPU to 4 virtual CPU you can increase it, or 4 GB RAM to 8 GB RAM you can increase it, so that it will serve 20,000 requests per minute. That is one option. So that we used to call it as vertical scaling. Vertical scaling. With this, what you need to do, you need to increase existing size. Okay, this is vertical scaling if you do it. So you can do vertical scaling till to some size only. What if it is 1 lakh requests per minute? What if it's 10 lakh requests per minute? So it will be difficult to upgrade it, right? So instead you need to maintain some servers in parallel. How you can maintain it? For example, if I create the same server, if I create one more server, and there I also put one more application, the same application I kept here as well, but here also this particular VM also having one IP address. Now, if you come to the DNS, if somebody browses www.irctc.com, the DNS you are clearly saying that you need to forward that request to the server with 2.2.2.2 only, but you added 3.3.3, but you cannot map a single address for two IP addresses. You cannot map it. Okay, you cannot map it because DNS don't know to whom it needs to send. So you need a device in between, and that device having one IP address, and if you have that IP address added to the DNS server, that request it will forward to that particular device, and that device has a functionality to distribute the traffic. Okay, so that we used to call it as a load balancer. So if you use load balancer here, and this load balancer having one IP address, this load balancer having one IP address. For example, if you consider this is load balancer or LB. So what I will do in this particular scenario, I will map my www.irctc.com with an IP address of 1.1.1.1. It's a load balancer IP. So I used to map my address with this load balancer IP. Okay, now what it will do, if something is requested for www.irctc.com, where initially I need to forward that request, I will forward that request to this load balancer because this IP is added. Now this load balancer have a mechanism to add any number of nodes as a backend. These are the backends we can call it as. You can add any number of nodes as a backend. Okay, you can add it. So this load balancer has a capacity or a functionality to distribute that particular traffic, whatever it is received, to the respective backends. So this is the basic functionality of load balancer. So how you can configure this particular one, how you can configure this backend, so all these things we will discuss. Okay, how the load balancer will forward the request to the backend, how it will forward to this server, how it will forward to this server, and what kind of mechanism it has, and what kind of algorithm it will use. So how you can configure it. So all these things we will discuss. Okay, now we'll work on one full-fledged scenario. I'll explain each and everything. So if you take, this is a normal load balancer, and this load balancer having multiple backends. Okay, so the individual backends you can club as a pool. So this we used to call it as backend pool. This is called backend pool. So for example, I have one load balancer and I have three. For example, you can consider VMs. This is VM1, this is VM2, and this is VM3. For example, I have three VMs and I have one load balancer. So first of all, if you want to integrate or if you want to connect your load balancer to the respective backend pool, the first setting you required is backend setting. So you need to establish a connection. Okay, you need to establish a connection to the respective backend. So this we used to call it as backend setting. Okay, so you have the backend setting, so you have the connectivity. That's absolutely fine. Now if you want to check the respective backend is healthy or not, otherwise what will happen, for example, if something is happened on this particular server, then you have the request received, so what will happen, it will forward that request to the respective backend, and if something is failed here, the users will get the failed responses. Okay, so that what the load balancer exactly does, it will first validate whether the backend server is healthy or not. If it is healthy, then only it will forward that request to the respective backend. So to do that, you need to configure one thing that is called health probe. So you need to configure one health probe to check the backend is healthy or not. So you will configure one health probe. That's fine. Now, so you have the backend connectivity and you have the health probe, whether the server is healthy or not, that's absolutely fine. Now you need to have one more thing to route whatever the request you are getting, whatever the traffic you are getting. To route the traffic to the respect to backend, you must define one thing that is called load balancer rule. Okay, so you need to specify a rule when I need to send the traffic to the respect to backend. This is called a load balancer rule. Load balancing rule. So with the help of this rule define, it will route the request to the respective backends. So if you want to configure one load balancer, you need to establish all the configurations. Like you must set up a backend, you must configure one backend pool. Inside the backend pool, you must add the resources. So you must add one health probe to check the backend health, and you must define one load balancing rule to route the traffic to the respective backend. So these are all the things you need to do. Now we'll see how we can create a load balancer. Step by step, we'll try to create a load balancer. Okay, so here you need to choose the respective subscription and the respective resource group where you want to create, and the name for your resource for your load balancer. So whatever the name you want to give, you can give the name, and then region. Make sure that wherever your virtual machines or wherever your traffic you want to distribute, right? So in that region only try to keep that load balancer, because this load balancer will be used to distribute traffic within the region only. So if your resources are in Canada Central, so you have to create load balancer in Canada Central only. That load balancer can be used to distribute traffic within the Canada Central only. So it won't distribute traffic across the region from one region to another region. It will distribute traffic within the region only. So that is the reason you need to create your respective load balancer in that particular region only. And next, the SKU type, the whatever the stop keeping unit, whatever you want to create now, you need to use standard or gateway. Basic you are going to retiring soon, so no need to use this. So either you can use a standard load balancer or gateway. If you want to use this load balancer as a gateway, then you can use gateway. But 99% majority of the people in real-time environment, they used to use standard type, because they use load balancer to distribute traffic to the backends, not as a gateway. So you can select the standard one only. Next one is type. So all the organizations, they used to prefer internal load balancer only, but you have something which you want to expose it to the public, then you can use public load balancer also. It's up to you. Okay, if it is internal means if you want to distribute traffic internally, and if you want to use this load balancer internal purpose only, in that purpose you can use internal. If you want to expose the traffic to the outside world directly to the internet, then you can use public load balancer. But majority of the people, they'll use internal load balancer only. So, and when you select public, it is giving two options, regional and global. If you want to use this load balancer as a global, or if you want to use this load balancer as a regional. If you select internal, it will give you an option for regional only. Okay, although it is giving, if you select public, although it is giving regional and global, always select regional only, don't select global, because it has certain limitations. So load balancer is not meant to distribute traffic across the regions. For that, there is a dedicated device called traffic manager. Okay, this load balancer we can use to distribute traffic within the region only. So you can select regional level load balancer, and then click on front end IP configurations. So to receive the traffic, the load balancer must have one IP address to receive the traffic, that is called front end IP. So what kind of IP you want to use, or what kind of IP you want to assign it to the load balancer to receive the traffic. If you want to receive the traffic from internet, then you can use public IP, or if you want to traffic from within the network or your own network, then you can use private IP. Okay, as we selected that load balancer type is public, so now it is asking to give the public IP address. Okay, if you see here it is asking to give the public IP address. But if you go a step back, if I select the load balancer type as internal, now if you come here and if you try to add your front end IP configuration, now it won't ask you for public IP. Here see, it is asking for your virtual network and your subnet from where you want to allocate one IP for this load balancer. This is for internal purpose. Okay, with this, one private IP will be assigned to the load balancer, and this will be used internally only. Okay, now we'll go for again step back and we'll select public load balancer and go to public. And now I need to add one IP address for this load balancer, public IP. So I'll use test load balancer public IP. For example, I'll give like this name like this, and I want to use IPv4 address only. So I don't have at the moment IP address. I have one IP address available. Let's try to create a new IP address. So this IP address I'm going to create. So I don't want zone redundant for now, and yes, click on save. So it will create a new IP address. Let's save this. Okay, and next go to the backend pools. So what kind of backend pools you want to keep? For example, if your IP address or if your front-end IP want to use to distribute traffic to the respective backend, like only one backend pool, then you can use one backend pool. No, I want to route traffic to the multiple backend pools. For each backend pool, I want to assign dedicated front-end IP. That also you can do it. For example, I have one more scenario. I have one more VM here. I have one more VM here. I have one more VM here. So these VMs are different. Okay, and for these VMs, okay, I want to access something. So I want to keep one load balancer. In that scenario, if you want, you can create a separate load balancer and there you can distribute the traffic, or else within the single load balancer only with different front-end IP, you can route your traffic to the respective backend. But here there is one drawback. The drawback is how many backends you are adding. Okay, irrespective of the backends, the front-end IP, if you observe, there is only IP address. This IP address somehow will be mapped in the DNS. This IP address somehow mapped in the DNS. For example, here I want to map the load balancer front-end IP like 2.2.2.2. with www.abc.com. So what it will do, whenever you have a traffic to www.abc.com, it will send the traffic to the load balancer. Now, based on the front-end IP you selected, the front-end IP is 2.2.2, right? So it will comes to here and it will forward that request to the respective backends associated to this front-end IP. If you want to host multi-domains, then you must have a path-based routing. That path-based routing will be available in application gateway. That we will discuss. So what are the drawbacks you have in the load balancer? The drawbacks you can overcome with the help of application gateway. There you have a dedicated listeners for each host name. So with that you can use that application gateway. Okay, that is one drawback. With the help of load balancer, you can only distribute traffic to the respective backend. It won't know anything. It won't inspect the traffic. The request is coming. Okay, I'll send first request to here, second request to here, third request to here. That's it. To route that request also, you have a load balancing algorithms. That is round robin method. Round robin. So what is meant by this round robin? First request comes to first. So you have method called round robin method. So with this method, what it will do, simply it will transfer first request to first server, second to second, third to third, and then again 4, 5, 6, and again 6, 7, 8, 9, like that. Or else you can use least connections method. Least connections. What it will do, it will observe how many requests it has. Suppose VM1 having 10 requests and VM2 having 5 requests and VM3 having 20 requests. So out of this, which is having least connection, it will send next request to that server. So we have certain load balancing algorithms available as a backend, like round robin, weighted round robin, least connections. There are certain algorithms available. Based on that, it will forward the traffic to the respective backend, but it won't inspect the packet. It won't know what kind of path we are getting, what kind of query string we are getting. It won't inspect. The request is coming. I will forward that request to the respective backend. That's it. It's a layer 3 load balancer. It will work on the network level. Okay. It won't inspect the packet. Whatever the request it is receiving, it blindly forwards it. Okay. That is one thing with load balancer. For example, I have a requirement. So let's say I have a website called www.abc.com. If I am searching for images, then you can send this request to one place, and if I am searching for videos, then you can send this request to another place. That is not possible with load balancer, because if you want to distribute the traffic based on the path, it must inspect what is the traffic receiving. That is possible with application gateway only, where it will work on layer 7 application level. It will work, it will inspect the traffic, what is coming and what is the request having, and based on path it will route the traffic to the respective backends. That is with application gateway. Whereas in load balancer it is not possible. Whatever the request it is receiving, it will forward that request to the respective backend. That's it. It won't do path based routings, it won't allow you to implement firewalls, nothing. Just it will route the traffic to the respective backend. Now if you come to here, so you need to add the respective backend pool. So for example, I am adding one backend pool called test backend, something you can call it as. And next you need to select respective virtual network where you want to add your virtual machines. For example, at the moment I have one virtual network. If you select that virtual network, it will allow you two options. You want to add the targets inside the backend pool via network interface card or via IP address. Better you can choose NIC, because this particular load balancer will be used to route traffic to the virtual machines and the virtual machine scale sets only. Okay, it will use to distribute traffic to the virtual machine and virtual machine scale sets. For both you have NIC enabled. For both NIC will be created before creating virtual machine and virtual machine scale set network interface card. So when you select NIC, so if you try to add it, it will show you what are the virtual machines available under this virtual network. Okay, if those are virtual machines, it will show under virtual machines. If those are virtual machine scale sets, it will show under virtual machine scale sets. At the moment I have virtual machines, so I have two virtual machines. If you want, you can select them and you can add them, so that in that backend pool these virtual machines will be added. Click on save. And next one is inbound rules. So in the inbound rules you have two kind of rules available. One is load balancing rule. So what is this load balancing rule? For example, you have the front end IP already configured, and from where I want to send the traffic. You want to send the traffic to the specific port, or you want to send traffic to another port. Okay, that kind of things, and what kind of health probe I need to use, and what kind of backend setting I need to use. So all these settings you will configure under this load balancing rule. And then NAT rule. If you want to network address translation, if you want to implement, then you can use an inbound NAT rule as well. That I can show you once this VM is created, once this load balancer is created. And next, outbound rule. Inbound rule is something which to allow, outbound rule is something which you need to send from this load balancer. So if you want to add, you can add that outbound rule as well. And then tags, and then review, and then create. It will try to validate, it will try to review the stuff whatever you have selected, and it will allow you to create if everything goes fine and every validation is successful. Now click on create. It will try to create a load balancer. Now we have the load balancer created. So if you click on the load balancer, what it created, you can see the basic details of the load balancer. So how many load balancing rule it has, what kind of health probe, how many health probes it has, NAT rules it has, what kind of tier it is having, what kind of SKU it is having. So all these basic details will be showed under overview. And next one is activity log. If anybody performs any action on the portal on this load balancer, that will be recorded here. And if you want to provide anyone access to this load balancer to manage, that you can provide it under access control. And if you want to specify tags for identification purpose or anything, that you can specify it under tags section. And then if you notice any issues in the load balancer, if you want to remediate any issues, that you can get it under diagnose and solve problems. Next one is settings section, which is important. Here you can see how many front-end IPs you have. At the moment I have one front-end IP, that is this one, this public IP. If it is internal, then based on the subnet you have assigned, it will try to allocate one IP address from that subnet as a front-end IP. And next, backend pools. How many backend pools I have? I have only one backend pool, and it contains two targets, two virtual machines I have. And next, health probes. So how many health probes you have? I don't have health probes at the moment. Let me configure the health probe. Click on add health probe. The health probe name I can give it as test health probe. I am giving it as. And now what protocol you want to use to connect or to check your health probe. If you want to use, you can use HTTP, or if you want, you can use HTTP, or if you want, you can use HTTPS. It's up to you. Okay, I want to use HTTP, for example. Now the backend port is 80. If it is HTTPS, the backend port is 443. Let me try to use HTTP, and then the port is 80. If you have any page configured as a backend, it will try to hit that page. Okay, if you don't configure any page, then you can use the default path as slash, and then time interval. For example, if you specify 5 seconds, every 5 seconds it will try to check this path on this port. Okay, every 5 seconds. Okay, that's it. And if it is already created or used by any rule, then it will come there. At the moment it is not used, that's why it is coming as not used. Once you assign this health probe to any load balancing rule, then it will come used by that particular rule. So let me create the health probe first. Okay, the health probe is created. Now coming to the load balancing rule, I don't have any rule. Let me add the load balancing rule. First, load balancing rule, test rule, I'm configure it as, okay, IP version is IPv4 only. So what is the front end IP address for this load balancing rule? I have one front end IP address, this one I selected. Okay, now yes, you receive traffic to this front end IP address. Where I want to send this traffic to, that you need to select respect to backend pool. So this is the backend pool. What it means, if I receive traffic to this front end IP, then I need to route that traffic to this respective backend pool, and this respective backend pool contains, I have a 2 virtual machines, so that the traffic will be forwarded to the respective 2 virtual machines. Next one is protocol. So if you want to forward that request to the backend pool or backend targets, what kind of port or what kind of protocol I want to use. If it is TCP, it is a transport communication protocol, or you can use UDP, user defined protocol, it's up to you. Okay, better to use TCP. If it is a customized port, then you can use UDP, user defined port. Okay, if you are using a generic ports, then you can use TCP like 80 or 443 or 22. So those kind of stuff you can use TCP. Next port, what kind of port I want to use? So for example, I want to use port 80 and backend port. So this is the traffic where you are receiving on the port, and this is the traffic which you are sending to the backend. So for example, if you observe here, from here to here the traffic needs to be received. This is called port, and from here to here it needs to contact the respective backend. This is called backend port. Okay, so which port I want to listen traffic on and which port I want to send traffic to the backend, this is called backend port. 2 ports you need to define. Okay, so that both ports I am defining as port 80 only. Now what health probe you want to use? At the moment I have configured one health probe, so that health probe I am using for this load balancing rule. So to test the backend is healthy, the test backend having 2 virtual machines, right? If those are healthy or not, that will be defined by using the health probe which we configured. Under this health probe you have a default path called slash. It will try to hit that path every time. So okay, so this you need to keep it in mind while assigning the health probe. Next one is session persistence. If you want to keep the session persistence, then you can keep it with the client IP and protocol, both it will maintain the persistence, or if you don't want, you can keep it as none. It doesn't matter. Next one is ideal timeout. So if the response is not receiving within 4 minutes, it will consider that response as timed out. Okay, so that you can need to define it. If you want to enable the TCP reset, you can enable it, or if you want to enable the floating IP also, you can enable it. Floating IP means the IP is not constant, it will vary every time. You can see without floating IP, Azure exposes a traditional load balancing IP address. Okay, so if you enable floating IP, it will changes. The floating IP changes the IP address mapping to the front end IP address of the load balancer to allow additional flexibility. If you want to enable, you can enable it, or else if your environment is stable and you have a static IP addresses assigned, you don't need to enable it. Next, outbound source network translation, SNAT, outbound net. If you want to enable internet on the virtual machine, or whatever the traffic you need to send out from your servers, then you can use this SNAT. No, I don't want to use that, I want to use my own things, then you can use default port allocation. That's it. If you want, you can use this one, or if you want, you can use this one. Recommended approach is you can use this one, but still it will not accessible because you have network security group, you have protected the subnet with network security groups, and you have all the firewall rules and outbound rules, inbound rules implemented. So still it won't, although you enable this option, it won't access the internet from that server. Okay, don't worry, you can enable this option. And next option is click on save, so that your load balancing rule will be created, so that it will know which IP address I want to receive traffic on. Once I get the traffic, where I need to forward the traffic to the which backend I want to forward the traffic. So if I want to test the backend is healthy or not, which health probe I want to use. Inside the health probe, I know what path I want to browse to know if the server is or backend is healthy or not. That I configured under health probe. Okay. If you want to see the health status, that you can see it under view details. Okay. If your backend is configured, it will tell you. It will take a while and it will tell you your backend is healthy or not. If it is healthy, then only it will forward the traffic to the respective backend. If you see on VM1, the backend is healthy, but on VM2, the backend is down. The backend is down. That means the VM2 is not healthy. So it will always forward traffic to the virtual machine 1 only, the VM1 only. It won't send the traffic to the 2 because it is down. Okay. So why it is down, I will show you later, because the VMs are not yet configured. From only one virtual machine is configured, that's why it is showing like that. So the another VM is not configured, that I will configure now. Okay. So let me go to the virtual machine 2. So I connected my virtual machine here. So let me try to configure IIS inside it. So because we must have one web server to send the response back to the load balancer or anything. So if it is Linux one, then you can use Apache or Tomcat or JBoss, WebLogic, WebSphere. There are many tools available. Or if you want to install a self-hosted tool, yes, you can install it. It's up to you. Okay, you must have one web server at least to send the response back. So I'm installing IIS in the server. So meanwhile the installation is going on. So we'll try to see other things as well. So this way you can configure the load balancing rule. Next, if you want to configure any inbound network address translation rules, that you can configure it here using inbound NAT rules. But this inbound NAT rules will not be usable because very soon or in a couple of years they are going to retire it. So we will not use any inbound NAT rules on the load balancer level. If you want, they can NAT it in the firewall itself. They won't NAT it here. So there is no need to configure outbound rules as well. Okay, if you want to configure, you can configure it, but these inbound rules and outbound rules are not that much required. Okay. And then properties, so you will see the basic details of your load balancer. That's it. You will see the insights of the load balancer if you configured, so how it is performing. See, if you see here, this is the IP address which you are receiving traffic to, and this is your rule where you are distributing your traffic to the respective backend, and this is your backend pool, and this backend pool contains two backends, this virtual machine and this virtual machine. You can see this status is healthy and you can see this status is unhealthy. That you can see it under insights. Okay, and now we will test the scenario itself. So we'll try to browse something on this. Now the request always serve from virtual machine 1 only because the 2 is down. Okay, so that we can verify that scenario now. So let's go to the test 1 server. So I'll go to the server 1. Let me connect to the server 1 first. So I'll go to server 1. Let me connect the server. So once the server is connected, we'll see. So we'll let me host one website here. The website is called www.abc.com. For example, I'll host it. The path, I can keep the default path, that is C inetpub www.root. I'll keep this only. That's it. The host name also www.abc.com. This is what I'm going to host my website. Okay, this is the website I'm going to host it. And for this website, if you go to the explore, I'll go to the basic page. Okay, here I will use the default page, or I can create a new page. Okay, I'll create a new page. For example, let me have a basic HTML code. Copy the basic HTML code. So I'll copy this. We'll go to the server 1. Paste it, and here I can call it as response from VM1. Okay, so let me save this as an HTML page. Save as test.html. So I used to save this as test.html page. Let me save it here. So I saved it. We close this. I have the test.html now. And next, this server I want to map it under localhost, that is drivers etc host file host entry. I need to add it. Notepad. So what is the entry? It is w127.0.0.1. it is mapped to www.abc.com. so if you need to add entry in your server, if you are not made entry on the server, what it will do, it will go to the internet. But if you map this as 127.0.0.1, it won't go to the internet. Instead, it will route the traffic to this particular server. This particular internet information service is hosted in that particular server. So now, if you try to go and if you try to browse the website within that server itself, then it will work. Okay, you can see that page within that server. Okay, the basic page, you can see it. You can see the basic page. If you want to see the page which we created right now, that is test.html, you can see that page within the server. This is, we are into the server now. Okay, so now if I want to access same content from outside, okay, then I need to browse with that particular server IP. But I want to use it from the load balancer. I want to test it from the load balancer. So how you can test it? First of all, this load balancer, you need to map your load balancer IP with the website. At the moment, I don't have a DNS. So let me configure on my laptop in my local DNS. So here I used to map the load balancer IP. So what is the load balancer IP I have? So I'll go to the front end IP configuration. So I'll see the IP address. So I'll copy this IP and I'll come to the here. I'll paste it here. I'll assign this as www.abc.com. Okay, that's it. Just added it entry. Now what it means to say, if I browse www.abc.com on my laptop, it's supposed to go to this load balancer only. So this load balancer only it's supposed to go. Okay, so that is the expectation. Now let's see how it work. Okay, I guess it will not work because we don't have we are not allowed port 80 and port 443 on that particular server network security group or network interface card. That is the reason it won't allow. Let me allow that. Let me add that. If you go to the virtual machine, if you go to the networking part or the virtual network or subnet, you have the subnet, default subnet which we created, but we don't have any network security group associated with this. That is the reason the port is not allowed. So let me open network security group. At the moment I don't have any network security group. Let me add one network security group. So test NSG. Network security group is used to allow or deny request to the specific subnet. Okay, because our servers are hosted in subnet, and in the subnet we have not defined any inbound and outbound rules. That is the reason it is denying it. Now we'll create a network security group and we'll assign this network security group to the subnet where the VMs are created. So I'll go here and I'll go to the inbound security rules. I don't have anything. Let me add one rule. The port I'm allowing is HTTP at the moment. Okay, allow. I'm adding only port 80 so that it will be allowed. Now outbound at the moment is not required, and if you want to associate, you can associate this to the subnet. At the moment I have this default subnet which I created the VMs, so I'm assigning this to the default subnet. Now the port 80 is allowed to the servers. So if you go here, now if you try to browse the same, now it will work. See it? If you want, you can browse the page which you created, test.html. Now you can see that response. Oh, sorry, not HTTPS. It must be HTTP. It's supposed to come. Okay, I think the second server is up. I think the second server is up. That is the reason it went to the second server. We'll show it to you. So if we go to the monitoring insights, let me check the backend details. Okay, this running only. Let me configure same on the second server as well, so that it will be easy to troubleshoot. It's supposed to come, but it will, I think it is going to the second server. Let me configure same on the second server as well, so that it will be easy to get the things. So on the second server also I installed the IIS. Let me go to information services. Here also I try to create or try to add a website with same name. Its name should be same. Okay, www.abc.com, and I want to give the path as inetpub, the default path for web server. I'm just giving the host name is www.abc.com, and that's it. Click on OK. Website will be there. If you go to the sites, if you go to the website, if you try to explore it, and then here you need to create one page. So I'll create a page, same page. Here also I'll copy the basic one. Basic code. Here I can say that response from VM2. Okay, this is the response from VM2. Let's save this as test.samepage HTML. Now if you save this, save it, this is done. You have the page now, and you need to go to again to the local host here, and then drivers, and then etc, and then host, and open with notepad, and here 127.0.0.1 I'm mapping with www.abc.com. This is what I'm mapping. I saved it, closed it. Okay, now if I browse anything here on this second server, it's supposed to give that page. Yeah, so if you browse that page as test.html, it's supposed to give the response. Yeah, this is from VM2. Now both servers are up. Let's see how the load balancer find both are up or not. We'll check the health. You can see it now. The both servers are healthy now. Now if you browse anything, the same page test.html, let's see the response is coming from here or response is coming from here. Let's see it now. Now if I browse the same, see, now I'm getting response from server 2. Okay, if you browse something, see, now I'm getting response from server 1. So this way it will route the traffic to the respective backends. How many servers you have created, that many servers it will forward it without any conditions. Okay, it will send response to one server and it will send response to another server, like that. Okay, so this way we can route traffic to the respective backend, and here you can see the backend status as well. If you want, you can see, if you want to, you can send the logs to somewhere, a log analytic workspace or storage account, that you can configure under diagnostic settings. If you want to search the logs related to the load balancer, that you can query it under this logs part. If you want to configure any alerts, that you can configure on the alerts section. If you want to see how much CPU or how much request you are getting, how much response time it is taking, all these things you will get it under this metrics section. Okay, so this way you can create a load balancer and you can test it.